They cried incessantly, and no one helped, until something unexpected happened. The scorching sun beat down mercilessly on the shopping mall parking lot when two women heard a blood-curdling sound. Desperate, high-pitched, almost suffocating barks, they ran towards the noise and found a scene no one should ever witness. A completely closed car, windows fogged with condensation, and inside, two small puppies struggling, tongues hanging out, panting, crying in a heartbreaking way. The thermometer read 38 degrees Celsius outside, but inside that vehicle, transformed into an oven. The temperature easily exceeded 50 degrees. Every second counted. Every minute of delay could mean the difference between life and death for those defenseless animals. The women banged on the windows, trying to calm the dogs. But the situation only worsened. The little creatures were panicking, scratching at the doors, trying to find fresh air that simply didn't exist inside. Time was running out. One of the dogs, a small white poodle, could barely stand, staggering from side to side, while its breathing became increasingly rapid and shallow. The other, a caramel-colored mongrel, scratched desperately at the window, as if it knew these were its last moments. No one around knew whose car it was. No one had seen the owner, and as the minutes passed like endless hours, the question echoed in the minds of everyone approaching the scene: will they survive? The women grabbed their cell phones, their hands trembling. They needed to act fast, very fast. Because the science is clear and cruel. A dog can die in just 15 minutes inside a closed car in the heat. And how long had those puppies been there? 10 minutes? 15? 20? No one knew for sure. But one thing was certain. Every second of hesitation could cost you innocent lives. What would you do in this situation? Break the window and face the legal consequences later? Wait for the police to arrive while watching animals suffer? This was the impossible decision those women had to make, right there, at that moment, while the desperate little eyes of the dogs pleaded for help through the fogged-up glass. Now, back in that infernal parking lot, the two women knew they couldn't wait any longer. One of them immediately called the police, while the other shouted throughout the entire mall trying to find the owner of the vehicle. People began to gather around the car, all with the same expression of horror and helplessness on their faces. Some filmed the scene, others just stood there, not knowing what to do, but everyone felt the weight of that urgent situation. The white poodle had already collapsed in the back seat, completely motionless, while the caramel-colored mongrel continued scratching at the window with the last of its strength. With each passing second, the scene became more agonizing, more unbearable. The women looked at each other, and in that silent moment, they made the most difficult decision of their lives. And you, who have been following this story so far, have you ever stopped to think about how many times situations like this happen every day and nobody does anything? If this topic resonates with you, if you also believe that we need to talk more about this and raise awareness, your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content that can literally save lives. If you want to continue seeing real stories that matter, that educate, and that transform, subscribe to the channel now and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. And click that like button, because that shows me that you are with me on this mission to spread awareness. Now, prepare your heart, because what happened in the next few seconds was something nobody expected. At that moment, as the crowd grew around the car, a narrative began to form in the mind of everyone present. It was almost automatic, instinctive. Someone had abandoned those puppies there. Someone irresponsible, cruel, inhumane had simply left two living beings, locked in a metal oven under the scorching sun, and went to do their shopping as if nothing was happening. Can you feel the anger rising? Because that's exactly what everyone was feeling in that parking lot. People started talking loudly, indignant, swearing that when the owner appeared, they would teach him a lesson. They would call the police. They would take justice into their own hands. An elderly lady said through tears that people like that didn't deserve to have animals. A man in a suit filmed everything with his cell phone, promising to expose the culprit on social media. Another group discussed whether they should break the window immediately or wait for the authorities to arrive. The truth is that all of us, when faced with a scene like that, do the same thing. We create a story in our heads based on what our eyes are seeing. And the story everyone was telling there was simple and direct. There was a villain in this situation, and that villain needed to pay for what he did. That's the transformation that happens in seconds within our minds. We go from neutral spectators to merciless judges. And look how interesting. Nobody there knew the complete facts. Nobody knew who owned the car, what the real situation was, what had led to that moment. But that didn't matter, because the scene itself already told a story convincing enough for everyone to draw their own conclusions. That's how our sense of justice works. It's quick, emotional, and often merciless. The women who found the dogs first thought the same thing. How could someone be so negligent? How could someone put their own convenience above the lives of two defenseless animals? These questions echoed in everyone's minds, fueling a collective indignation that grew every minute. And you know what's most impactful about all this? That this reaction wasn't wrong. The indignation was legitimate. The sense of urgency was necessary. The desire to protect those animals was noble and humane. But what no one there knew yet, and this will completely change how you see this story, is that the truth behind that scene was far more complex than anyone could imagine. Because sometimes, reality hides layers that our eyes can't capture at first glance. Sometimes, the villain we create in our minds doesn't exist in the way we think. And sometimes, the journey between what seems to be happening and what is actually happening reveals much more about ourselves than about the situation itself. In that parking lot, while everyone waited with growing fury for the arrival of the vehicle's owner, no one imagined that the next few minutes would defy all the assumptions made up to that point. Comment below. I would have thought that too if you recognized that you would have had the same initial reaction. The crowd continued to grow, and collective anger filled the air. One of the women who had found the puppies first began to notice something strange. Something that didn't quite fit the narrative everyone was constructing. She moved closer to the window, wiping away the condensation with her hand to try and see better inside. And that's when she noticed details that completely changed her interpretation of the scene. The puppies weren't trying to hide from the heat, as would be natural. They weren't seeking shade under the seats. Nor were they lying down trying to conserve energy, as animals under heat stress usually do. On the contrary, both were standing, completely facing the front of the car, the dashboard, the steering wheel. The white poodle, even in critical condition, kept its eyes fixed in that specific direction. The caramel-colored mixed-breed dog barked at intervals that seemed to follow a pattern, as if trying to communicate something urgent, something that went beyond its own discomfort. It was almost as if they weren't asking to get out. They were asking for attention for something inside the vehicle. This revelation began to form a new layer of mystery over the whole situation. The woman drew her friend's attention and pointed to the animal's behavior. They exchanged confused glances, trying to decipher what it meant. Why would dogs in mortal danger be focused on the car's dashboard, instead of scratching at the windows trying to escape? Why did those barks seem to have a rhythm, a directed urgency, as if they were trying to alert someone to something specific? The shift in perception began subtly. What seemed like a clear case of abandonment and neglect now carried elements that didn't make sense within that simple narrative. The behind-the-scenes aspects of that scene began to reveal themselves in a completely unexpected way. A man in the crowd, who apparently understood animal behavior, approached and observed for a few seconds. He shook his head, intrigued, and said something that made everyone pause for a moment. These dogs aren't acting like abandoned animals. They're acting like animals trying to get attention for something. The people around began to look more closely, trying to understand what he meant. And the more they observed, the clearer it became that there was something profoundly strange about that behavior. The poodle, though clearly dehydrated and weak, used its last strength not to try to escape but to stare intently at something inside the car that no one could see from the outside because of the angle and the fogged windows. This change of perspective brought a new decision to the group. They needed to see what was inside besides the dogs. They needed to understand what those animals were trying to show them with such insistence. The journey of discovery was only beginning, and the truth hidden behind those fogged windows promised to be far more impactful than anyone there could have imagined. That moment represented a crucial turning point, the point where appearances begin to deconstruct and a deeper reality begins to emerge. What was happening inside that car went far beyond a simple reaction to the extreme heat. The more people watched, the more evident it became that those little dogs were demonstrating an intelligence and intentionality that took everyone by surprise. The caramel-colored mongrel had a very specific pattern in its behavior. It only barked when someone approached the vehicle. When people moved away, it would stop, stare intently at the front of the car, and the moment someone came back near the window, the barking would start again, with full force. It wasn't a continuous bark of despair, as would be expected from an animal panicking from the heat. It was calculated, purposeful, as if it knew exactly what it was doing, as if it were trying to ensure that people wouldn't leave, that they would stay there paying attention. The white poodle, even visibly weaker and more debilitated, found the strength to do something even more impressive. It would repeatedly jump onto the windshield, placing its paws on the dashboard, looking down towards the driver's side floor, and then cry again, looking at the people outside. It was as if he were trying to show something, to point to something specific that no one else could see. This type of behavior revealed layers of emotional connection and animal cognition that most people are completely unaware of. Those puppies weren't just reacting to the hostile environment, they were communicating, trying to convey an urgent message through the only language they had available. The woman who first noticed these patterns felt a chill run down her spine. She had worked for years as a volunteer in animal shelters and knew canine behavior in stressful situations. Well, what she was seeing there wasn't normal. It wasn't just physical suffering. It was something much deeper, much more complex. It was a directed, intentional cry for help, almost human in its clarity of purpose. The crowd around began to notice as well. The conversations changed tone. The blind anger against the supposed negligent owner gave way to restless curiosity, a growing sense that there was a hidden truth in that situation that needed to be urgently uncovered. The puppies were trying to save someone. This revelation hit everyone present like a punch in the gut. It wasn't them who needed saving, or at least, not only them. That coordinated behavior, that insistence on drawing attention to the front of the car, those pleading looks weren't those of abandoned animals seeking escape. They were animals fulfilling a mission, protecting someone, warning of a danger that went far beyond their own discomfort. The journey of understanding was taking a completely unexpected turn. The impact of this discovery transformed the entire dynamic of that parking lot. People no longer knew whether to break the window immediately or to be more careful to fully understand what was happening before acting. The collective mentality shifted from executors of justice to investigators of a mystery that deepened with each passing second. And the puppies, those little four-legged heroes, continued their desperate communication, knowing that time was running out, not only for them, but for someone who depended on them at that critical moment. Comment here. Animals are amazing. If you are also surprised by the intelligence of these puppies, now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because it was precisely at that moment that one person in the crowd made the difference between life and death. He was a man in his 40s, with gray hair, who had recently arrived at the parking lot and stopped when he saw the whole crowd. He didn't say anything at first, just observed silently while everyone discussed what to do. But while most people were focused on the puppies, or debating whether to call the police, this man was paying attention to something different. He was following the animal's gaze. It may seem like a small detail, insignificant even, but this change of perspective was the turning point of the whole story. While everyone was looking at the puppies, he was looking where the puppies were looking. It's amazing how sometimes the solution to a mystery is literally right in front of us. But we need someone with the right mindset, with the ability to see beyond the obvious, to connect the dots. This stranger slowly approached the car, placed his hands on the window, blocking the sunlight to see better through the fogged glass, and began to follow the insistent line of sight of the white poodle. The little dog jumped on the dashboard, looked down, whined, and repeated the process. The man adjusted the angle, lowered his head a little more, trying to see the floor on the driver's side, and suddenly his face changed completely. The casual expression of curiosity gave way to something between shock and absolute urgency. He took a step back, glanced quickly at the two women who had found the puppies first, and said just 3 words that made everyone's heart race in that parking lot. There's someone inside. The silence that followed was deafening. Those 3 words rewrote the entire narrative that had been built up until then. It wasn't negligence. It wasn't abandonment. It wasn't cruelty. It was a medical emergency, happening right under everyone's noses. And the only ones who had noticed from the beginning were 2 desperate puppies, trying to save the life of someone they loved. The transformation in the atmosphere was instantaneous. Indignation turned into productive panic. People rushed to the car, trying to confirm what the man had seen. And there it was, partially hidden by the tilt of the seat. A human figure lying on the driver's side floor, completely motionless. The revelation brought with it an overwhelming wave of contradictory emotions. Relief at finally understanding what was happening. Horror at realizing the gravity of the situation. Admiration for the intelligence and loyalty of those 2 puppies who never gave up asking for help. And a collective guilt for having spent precious minutes judging a situation they didn't fully understand. The behind the scenes of that seemingly simple scene now revealed a terrifying complexity. Someone was having a medical emergency inside that car, possibly a heart attack, a stroke, a diabetic crisis, and while that person fought for their life, the only guardians they had were 2 small dogs who did everything in their power to bring help. The impact of this discovery changed everything. The decision to break the window was no longer a matter of moral or legal debate. It was an urgent medical necessity. That man who stopped to follow the puppy's gaze had just saved not 1, but 3 lives with a single gesture of genuine care. What followed transformed that rescue scene into something no one there will ever forget. When the man finally got a better angle through the glass, and the others moved closer to confirm the full truth, began to unfold in increasingly disturbing layers. There was a woman, probably in her 50s, completely unconscious on the floor beside the driver. Her head was tilted at an odd angle, her arms limp at her sides. No visible movement. She had slid from the seat and become partially trapped between the seat and the dashboard, in a position that made her almost invisible to anyone casually glancing through the side window. The puppies weren't just suffering from the heat, they were guarding their owner, desperately trying to bring help to someone who couldn't call for help on her own. And here's the part that made everyone's stomach churn. The car was locked from the inside. The automatic locks had engaged when the woman lost consciousness, sealing her and the puppies in a metal and glass trap that grew hotter with each passing minute. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come, because as people looked more closely, they noticed something that completely changed the urgency of the situation. It wasn't just a matter of heat. The extreme heat was terrible, even deadly, but it wasn't the biggest problem facing that woman at that moment. Around her arm, partially hidden by her sleeve, was a medical alert bracelet. One of the women who understood first aid managed to read through the fogged glass. Diabetic. The transformation in understanding that emergency was brutal and instantaneous. That woman had probably suffered hypoglycemic or hypoglycemic shock while driving, lost consciousness before she could even park properly, and had been there long enough for her condition to deteriorate to potentially fatal levels. The puppies had sensed that something was wrong with her from the first moment, probably felt when she started to feel unwell, and since then they had been doing the impossible to get her attention, to bring help, even while they themselves were fighting against the deadly heat. The journey of those 2 little 4-legged heroes was untaid about their own survival. It was about saving the life of the person they loved above all else. The impact of this revelation hit everyone like a wave. People who minutes before were ready to lynch the supposed negligent owner now had tears in their eyes, realizing the hidden truth behind that scene. This wasn't a story of abandonment. It was a story of absolute loyalty, unconditional love, and animal intelligence that defied all expectations. And the clock kept ticking relentlessly. The woman needed urgent medical attention. The puppies were at the limit of their physical endurance. Every second of hesitation could mean the difference between life and death for the 3 of us. The decision couldn't wait any longer. Someone needed to break that glass now, but in a way that would further injure the unconscious woman or frighten the puppies to the point of causing them a heart attack due to the extreme stress they were already under. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what happened in the following minutes was an impressive demonstration of how human beings can organize themselves and act when it really matters. The transformation was instantaneous. That crowd of indignant spectators turned into a coordinated rescue team in a matter of seconds. One of the women was already on the phone with the firefighter, describing the situation with a clarity and urgency that made every word count. She relayed all the information they could observe through the glass: an unconscious diabetic woman locked inside the vehicle, 2 dogs in critical condition, and an outside temperature nearing 40 degrees Celsius. On the other end of the line, the operator confirmed that an ambulance was on its way, but the estimated time of arrival was 12 to 15 minutes. Too long. Everyone there knew it was too long. Meanwhile, the man who had discovered the unconscious woman was already assessing which window to break. He asked someone to look for a rock or something heavy in the parking lot. 2 young men ran off in opposite directions. Another man offered a tire iron he had in the trunk of his own car. The decision was meticulously calculated. They needed to break the rear window on the opposite side from the puppies to minimize the risk of injuring them with shards of glass. A woman who worked at a nearby pet shop brought 2 large towels. The plan was to break the glass, quickly unlock the doors, remove the puppies first wrapped in the towels to protect and calm them, and only then focus on attending to the unconscious woman until the ambulance arrived. But there was one detail that made everything even more tense. The puppies continued to whine, bark, looking at their owner and then at the people outside. It was as if they knew exactly what was at stake. As if they understood that this whole mobilization was their last hope. The white poodle, even visibly exhausted, didn't stop whimpering, looking at the woman on the ground. The caramel-colored mongrel barked whenever he saw someone moving away from the car, as if begging them not to give up, not to leave. The emotional intelligence of those animals was on full display for everyone there. They weren't just victims of a terrible situation. They were active participants in the rescue effort for their owner. Another person in the crowd had the idea to call the fire department as well. thinking that perhaps they would arrive faster and have the proper equipment to open the car without causing damage. The call was made. The fire truck was 8 minutes away. But 8 minutes still seemed like an eternity when you're re-looking at an unconscious person and two animals on the verge of collapse. The woman needed urgent medical attention. The puppies were at the limit of their physical endurance. Every second of hesitation could mean the difference between life and death for the three of us. The decision couldn't wait any longer. Someone needed to break that glass now, but in a way that would further injure the unconscious woman or frighten the puppies to the point of causing them a heart attack due to the extreme stress they were already under. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what happened in the following minutes was an impressive demonstration of how human beings can organize themselves and act when it really matters. The transformation was instantaneous. That crowd of indignant spectators turned into a coordinated rescue team in a matter of seconds. One of the women was already on the phone with the firefighter, describing the situation with a clarity and urgency that made every word count. She relayed all the information they could observe through the glass: an unconscious diabetic woman locked inside the vehicle, two dogs in critical condition, and an outside temperature nearing 40 degrees Celsius. On the other end of the line, the operator confirmed that an ambulance was on its way, but the estimated time of arrival was 12 to 15 minutes. Too long. Everyone there knew it was too long. Meanwhile, the man who had discovered the unconscious woman was already assessing which window to break. He asked someone to look for a rock or something heavy in the parking lot. Two young men ran off in opposite directions. Another man offered a tire iron he had in the trunk of his own car. The decision was meticulously calculated. They needed to break the rear window on the opposite side from the puppies to minimize the risk of injuring them with shards of glass. A woman who worked at a nearby pet shop brought two large towels. The plan was to break the glass, quickly unlock the doors, remove the puppies first wrapped in the towels to protect and calm them, and only then focus on attending to the unconscious woman until the ambulance arrived. But there was one detail that made everything even more tense. The puppies continued to whine, bark, looking at their owner and then at the people outside. It was as if they knew exactly what was at stake. As if they understood that this whole mobilization was their last hope. The white poodle, even visibly exhausted, didn't stop whimpering, looking at the woman on the ground. The caramel-colored mongrel barked whenever he saw someone moving away from the car, as if begging them not to give up, not to leave. The emotional intelligence of those animals was on full display for everyone there. They weren't just victims of a terrible situation. They were active participants in the rescue effort for their owner. Another person in the crowd had the idea to call the fire department as well, thinking that perhaps they would arrive faster and have the proper equipment to open the car without causing damage. The call was made. The fire truck was 8 minutes away. But 8 minutes still seemed like an eternity when you're re-looking at an unconscious person and two animals on the verge of collapse. The tension was palpable. Every passing second weighed like lead on everyone's shoulders. People took turns talking to the puppies through the glass, trying to calm them with soft voices, promising that everything would be all right soon. And the most impressive thing is that the puppies seemed to respond to this. When someone spoke to them calmly and reassuringly, they reduced their barking for a few seconds, as if they understood that help was coming, that they were no longer alone in that desperate battle for survival. The human cooperation in that parking lot was a beautiful thing to see. Complete strangers working together with a single goal: to save 3 lives before it was too late. No one there knew the woman, no one knew the puppies' names, but they were all united in a current of empathy and action that transcended any differences they might have had. Write this down. Faith in humanity restored if you were also moved by this unity. Because the moment the fire truck turned the corner of the parking lot was like everyone there could breathe again. The sirens cut through the tense atmosphere and brought with them a wave of relief that was almost palpable. It had been exactly 6 minutes since the call, 2 minutes faster than expected, and those 120 seconds of difference could very well have saved 3 lives. The firefighters got out of the vehicle already assessing the situation as they walked. The team had 4 people. 2 went straight to the car with the rescue equipment, while the other 2 began to gather information from the people who had been there from the beginning. The process was surprisingly quick and precise. In less than 30 seconds, they had already identified the best point to break the glass, positioned a protective top, and given the warning for everyone to move away. The sound of the glass shattering echoed through the parking lot like a bell of liberation. The puppies jumped, startled by the noise, but immediately began to bark with renewed energy, as if they knew that help had finally arrived. One of the firefighters unlocked the back door from the inside and carefully opened it. The heat that poured out of the car was like opening an oven door, a suffocating wave that even made the firefighters recoil for a second. The internal temperature must have easily been above 55 degrees. How those puppies managed to survive that, while still maintaining the mental clarity to call for help, was bordering on miraculous. The lady from the pet shop sprang into action with the towels, first picking up the white poodle, which was the most debilitated. He was trembling all over, his tongue still hanging out, but when he felt the human arms around him and the cool air hitting his snout, he let out a gasp that broke everyone's heart. The caramel-colored mixed-breed dog was taken out soon after, and even exhausted. He struggled to look back inside the car, making sure his owner was being taken care of. Meanwhile, the other two firefighters were already working on the unconscious woman. They quickly checked her vital signs: weak but present pulse, shallow breathing, skin clammy to the touch. One of them immediately grabbed the glucose meter they carried in their emergency kit. The reading confirmed what they suspected: severe hypoglycemia. Her blood sugar was dangerously low. They administered glucose via oral gel while preparing to transport her. The fire department ambulance arrived less than a minute later, and the transition was seamless. The medical team took over attending to the woman, while the firefighters helped stabilize the puppies with fresh water and wet towels to gradually lower their body temperature. And it was at that moment, as the woman was placed on the stretcher and the paramedics began administering intravenous fluids, that something extraordinary happened. The caramel-colored mixed-breed dog, even trembling with exhaustion, broke free from the arms of the woman holding him and ran to the stretcher. He placed his paws on the edge, stretched his neck, and licked his owner's hand that hung out, as if to say, "I did my part. I brought help. Now you need to get better." The tears that ran down the faces of the people there were not of sadness. They were of pure gratitude. Gratitude to those two puppies for having the intelligence and persistence to call for help. Gratitude to the people who stopped to pay attention. Gratitude to the emergency services who arrived in time. Because the uncomfortable and frightening truth is that without the desperate warning from those animals, that woman would probably have died alone inside that car, and no one would have noticed until it was too late. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this whole story goes far beyond a simple, heartwarming rescue. It reveals layers of animal intelligence and interspecies connection that most people are completely unaware of, and that science has only recently begun to systematically document. What happened in that parking lot was neither luck nor coincidence. It was the result of millions of years of evolution that shaped dogs into the most attuned companions to human beings on the planet. Recent studies in animal neuroscience show that dogs possess the unique ability to read human emotional and physiological states with frightening accuracy. They can detect subtle changes in our body odor when we are stressed, when our blood sugar drops drastically, when we are about to have a seizure. There are dogs trained to alert diabetics to hypoglycemic crises up to 15 minutes before symptoms manifest, simply because they sense the chemical change that occurs in the person's sweat and breath. But here's the truly extraordinary part. Those two puppies in the parking lot were not professionally trained service dogs. They were just ordinary pets that had developed this deep bond with their owner through daily interaction, unconditional love, and the attention that only dogs know how to give. They realized something was wrong with her, not because someone told them to recognize the signs, but because the emotional connection between them was strong enough that any change in her normal behavior triggered all the alerts in their brains. The transformation in our understanding of canine intelligence has been radical in recent years. For a long time, we deeply underestimated the cognitive and emotional capacity of dogs. We thought they were simple creatures driven by basic instinct and conditioning. But the hidden truth that researchers have been discovering is much more fascinating. Dogs possess a theory of mind, can understand perspectives different from their own plan, future actions, and most importantly, can communicate complex needs to humans in creative ways when the situation demands it. Those puppies weren't just crying because they were hot or scared. Their behavior was strategic, intentional, and directed. They only barked when people approached because they knew they needed to keep human attention focused on that situation. They would jump on the panel pointing to where their owner was because they understood that humans needed to see what they were seeing. They maintained this behavior pattern for extended periods even under extreme physical stress because their priority was unto their own survival, was saving someone who depended on them. This goes straight to the heart of what makes the relationship between humans and dogs so special. It's not a master-servant relationship. It's not even just companionship. It's a deep evolutionary partnership where both species have become fundamentally connected to one another. Dogs don't just see us as a source of food and shelter. They see us as part of their own family, as individuals who deserve protection and care in the same way they would receive it from us. The impact of this revelation completely changes how we should think about our pets and the signals they give us daily. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this story raises a question that should keep us awake at night and completely change the way we interact with the animals around us. How many lives have been saved by animals that no one was listening to? How many times has a dog barked differently, acted strangely, insisted on drawing attention to something, and we simply ignored it because we were busy, distracted, or because we assumed it was just meaningless animal behavior? The hidden truth is that we are surrounded by constant communication from our animals, but our modern mentality, our haste, our disconnection from the natural world, has made us deaf to this language. We think we understand our dogs because they wag their tails when we are happy, or hide when they do something wrong. But this is only the surface of a deep ocean of communication that happens every day, and we simply pay enough attention to decode. There are countless documented stories of dogs waking their owners in the middle of the night before a gas leak turned fatal, refusing to let children near dangerous areas, detecting cancer in its early stages through persistent sniffing of a specific area of the human body. And for every one of these stories that made headlines, how many others went unnoticed? How many animals tried to warn of dangers and were reprimanded for being noisy or annoying? The transformation we need to make isn't in our animals, it's in ourselves. We need to develop the ability to observe, to truly pay attention to behavioral patterns, subtle changes, and the signals our four-legged companions constantly give us. Protecting isn't just about providing food, water, and shelter. Protecting is about creating a two-way communication channel where we not only talk to our animals, but also learn to listen to what they are trying to tell us. Those two women in the parking lot did the right thing by stopping and paying attention when they heard desperate barking. But the true hero of the story, the man who decided to follow the puppy's gaze instead of just looking at them, understood something fundamental. Animals have perspective, they have information we don't, and when they are trying to show us something, it's worth investigating. That's the decision that saved 3 lives that day. The decision to take animal communications seriously. The decision to accept that when a dog acts insistently and out of the ordinary, there's a real reason behind it. The impact of this change in mindset goes far beyond emergency situations. It completely transforms the relationship we have with our animals. They cease to be merely passive pets that depend on us and become active partners in life's journey, each contributing their unique abilities to mutual well-being. And perhaps the most profound reflection this story brings us is about loyalty and unconditional love. Those puppies were dying of heat. They could have simply lain down and conserved energy, just trying to survive. But they chose to use every ounce of strength they had to save the person they loved. How many of us, human beings, who pride ourselves on our superior intelligence, would do the same? How many of us would have that clarity of purpose, that absolute devotion even in the face of death itself? If this story touched you the way it touched me, leave a like below so that more people can see and reflect on it. Comment if you have ever witnessed an animal asking for help, or if you have a similar story to share, because these narratives need to be heard and valued. And if you believe, like me, that dogs are much more than simple companions, that they are guardians, silent heroes, family members with capabilities that we are barely beginning to understand, then subscribe to the channel, because I regularly bring content like this. Real stories that make us question, learn and value even more these incredible beings who share life with us.